Oh, my dad got me into the sport. My dad pulled a 1250 806, and my mom pulled an 806 and 66 in powder puff class in our local area. My dad originally was farmed, but then he was into milk cows. He got rid of them. He ran a stock car, an old jalopy, around for a while, and then he got hooked on tractor pulling in about 1965 or 6. And when I turned 15, we went over to John Klug's, picked up some old wore-out injectors, and John was a good friend of Mom and Dad back in the day. Honestly, farming was growing, and like my sisters were older and involved in everything, and he just saw it was time for him. So then when 78 rolled around, I still wanted to. I'm 15, he hauls me over to Klug, and I got my permit, so I get to drive over and back. We come home, some old 6-hole injectors, you know, and John told us to put a water bottle off of an International truck in the air cleaner with one little water nozzle, and put a glow plug button off a 560 on the deck, so when you put a bigger pump on, you know, the local out of the field stuff, you put I'd put my foot off the clutch, bought a double disc clutch from Lee Elward, he used one, and Dad helped me put that all together, you know, and fire would start coming out of the pipe, and I'd put my heel on that and a little bit of water to put the fire out. Of course, you know, it's 350 horse, 330 horse, you know, but I did that for a couple of years. There was an association up in western Iowa, people you wouldn't know, but Roger Sorensen still runs a Ford dealership today, or not Ford anymore, just a Kinsey, but he had a Ford tractor, and Younggrens was up in there, had some internationals. There was a D21 out of up in that area. They had a really nice little 5-mile-an-hour pace class, you know, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth on it. And then we did that a couple of years ago. I just went very local, really, but I never lost the urge. And then in '83, I bought an 806 from a guy at Glenwood, Iowa, about 50 miles away. And I roll in there with my old straight truck. I followed Randy Hinton up there. They used an implement truck with the old Transtar in the front, you know. There was a mud hole in the middle of the track. Dave Vainrib ran the Pro Stock at that time from Pocahontas with P-pump on, you know. There was probably 6, 7 tractors up there running, you know. And I drove around the mud hole and put 20 foot on everybody. And the guy come walking over to me in my age, and he said, "You're in the wrong class. You need to be running a super stock." And it was Brett Burke. They were pulling there that night. They had a class just for them. They come in a flatbed with these 2 immaculate TS custom painted, you know, Atlas complete 7. But well, Bill's was in the 9 yet. He hadn't dropped it to the 7 class. Brett was in the 7 with the badass binder. That was '84. I was 22 years old. And that's how bad I wanted to go tractor pulling. I bounced a Lodestar International with a 4 and a 2, 345 gas, AM radio to Bowling Green. And I did that, that's why I used the next, we had no money. I mean, '80s were tough. But I went to Brett's that next winter. I sold my motor off to Randy Hinton, and I put a 466 together, and I took it up there. I'd met Vaughn a couple years before that. In fact, he made me a set of steel wheels, and I had a set of old Farm 30s, and Vaughn made me the frame rails and the seat and fender out of aluminum, just a cheap deal to get by. And I come out with, I only had 400 pounds movable at Tomah, Wisconsin in the 7 Superstock class. And I struggled that year. About halfway through the years, I really got to give credit to a man named Steve Webster from St. Joe Diesel. And he gave me a pump, a P-pump. I went down and worked on it with him, and he pretty crude how we did it, but he got it fast delivery. And I was afraid to put it on. And I was struggling. Just, you know, 6th to 10th place tractor when I'd go hook with them. We had a region hook at Sedalia, Missouri, and Steve drove over there in his motorhome, said, "You got my pump on yet?" I said, "No." He said, "Why not?" I said, "That's a good question, Steve. You're here, we're gonna put her on." And I put her on, and I got 3rd that night against Elward and Bergs and everybody. Made a really good run. And the next night was at the Iowa State Fair, and I won. And in '88, Tim Engler, Billy Giberson went to work for Tim Engler. He worked for John Klug first, then he worked for Bergs, and then he went to work for Tim Engler. I went down there and we put a hit, before I went to Indy Super Bowl that winter, he put me at the first Engler drawbar on a cast tractor. And Tim and me got to be really good friends and helped me out a little bit, and he made me a rock star because I was the first one to have, he put a Humpco transmission out the top of the housing. I had to go put a front mount starter. That winter after Louisville, he built me a new frame, put a front mount starter on it, and we were setting up to put this Humpco tranny in, because I didn't have a tranny. We was running a 7, 9, and 11 without a tranny in '88. I went to Tomah, and the tranny was ready to compete in. So I followed Tim home from Tomah before Fort Recovery, and we put the center section in. But he says, "You might as well enter the 11 because you're going to have a tranny for it next week." So I entered the 11, blew my tires up, weighted my front end heavy. The same gear I ran the 7 and 9 in, I ran the 11 in. It died, and they restarted the class. So I had to kill it again, but guess what? I won. Yeah, so it's kind of a funny deal. I'm going to put a tranny in to run all, but that made, Tim Engler made me a rock star. That tranny was golden. It gave me 3 gears for 3 classes, and I went on to win my first national title that year in '88 in the 7. I got 3rd in the 9 points, 3rd in the 11. And kind of a funny story, I missed one of the hooks in the 11, and if I would have got, in Horsehead, New York, if I would have got hook points there, I'd have won the points in the 11. But after the banquet in New Orleans, one of my highlights of my whole life was we snuck away from everybody else. Esden Lane, Danny Dean, and me. We had Kendall black coats on with our points champions on. We snuck down on the Bourbon Street into a little bar and sat there till daylight and drank and had a good time. 3 champions sitting there together. It's the coolest moment I've ever had. And then, like I said, my wife was pregnant, and it was just tougher and tougher to beat the Alkies. One here, you know, and I just was tired of beating my head. I thought they needed to split the classes. I didn't think they ever would. And honestly, I needed to raise a family. And I started kind of farming a little more than, in '96, I'd started renting some land again. I'd bought a farm in the late '80s, and I was just still helping Dad. And anyway, I decided time to grow the farm. So I shut her down pulling wise for a couple of years, and I couldn't quite stay out of it. And old Terry Benson, you know, from Wisconsin, was wanting me to help him build a super farm. Ended up owning it, and he built the chassis, and I finished everything else, built the motor. And like I said, I ran it a little bit just to help it, but we won the first finals at Louisville with that tractor. First time we ever hooked it at Tomah, we won. Yeah, super farm. Now, I didn't want to drive it, but the thing wasn't running. I had a 540 in that. They're leftover super stock parts. Sure. And I kept telling him, and I had another buddy of mine, Kevin Tanner, I let him drive it because I didn't want to drive it. And I needed somebody to bring it back from Wisconsin for me to work on. So I was letting them drive it, and they weren't getting her done. So we went to the Missouri State Fair, and I'm a super stock pour. I'm not getting on that damn Supron. No, that's below me, you know. I found out right quick, they needed more respect in that class because they're so tough. It's hard to win in that class. But I went down there that day. It was in the afternoon hook, and anyway, I drove it. I won. And old Paul Vandernoord, he never knew who Rob Russell was, never heard of him in his life, you know. And I went flying by, and he told Norm Caban, "Who in the hell is that?" Because him and Norm were the top two at that time. We went into the Iowa State Fair, and I let this Kevin Tanner, good friend of mine, drive it in the afternoon. He had a lot of family coming to watch. He got 7th. I'm like, all right, you're out of the seat. I got this State Fair sweep. I got to win one of these. I died in front of Norm. Couple inches, won again. Norm unhappy. Norm's a good competitor, you know. But I had to run it like Dennis Brabeck and Alan did their light super. I didn't have the cubic inch and enough horsepower, so I set the clutch up that it would give up on the other end. We kept it for a couple more years, and I just, you know, it's $5,500 every couple of months to get a new turbo, and I'm like, I'm not driving it. So I told Terry, I said, I'm done financing. So we ended up selling it finally. And then this tractor I actually built. Took me 2 years to get it done, and Terry helped build a lot of it. The original one, Jack Kilmeyer, put the rear end in a fun frame for me, and Brett Bird kind of orchestrated that. We took it down to Dibble and did the sheet metal, and then I put a Hypermax motor together, and Terry did a lot of the finished stuff, mounted the cooler and stuff, and I debuted it for Cody Shea, who I built it for, and I ran it at Tomah in 2011, unpainted. He didn't want to run it. He was scared of it, and I got like 14th out of 21 the first night, and I was hooked. I'd always promised my wife that I wouldn't get back into the sport until our youngest, Gracie, was out of high school. Well, she was just going to be a freshman. But I come home and I said, honey, I'm too old to build another. Cody don't want this one. He's scared of it, and I want it, so I'm going to keep it. So she understood. I said, it'll come third, family first, showing cattle second, because we were huge into that and enjoyed it. Same deal there. That's about people, but the only thing about showing cattle is it gets a little political. Pulling, you go the furthest you win. But still a lot of good people, and there's a lot of overlay between the two hobbies with families. There's a lot of people in Poland that have done the cattle and vice versa. But anyway, long story short, I kept the tractor, ran it that summer, and with the Hyper motor. I took the motor out that fall. Cody had ordered the 1206 from Ace Chassis, and we took the motor out. I changed a couple things, and we put the Hypermax 4.9 on for Outlaw. And that's when we debuted the 1206 with that same motor in it at Kansas City. But he drove her out of bounds. First, the brake pedal, they couldn't reach him right that night. But then he painted it, and that's when I painted that tractor white, and I bought the DNR motor for it. And I ran that chassis 1 year, and then sold the chassis to Dennis Schaubert. They bought the chassis and put a green hood on it and so that's where that chassis went. And Tim built me this chassis here, and I kept the hood, but had to have new fenders on it. So, you know, Dibble. Tim's roll cage was different than Staley Funds. And we got that done and ran that tractor white in the 12. Well, the English chassis 13, 14, and 15. Now, I left home in 88 and 89. I left my home in an enclosed trailer Brett Bergen made. He went to a semi on a dually, and I didn't come home all summer. I left in June and didn't come home till after Inwood, Ontario in September. Well, I relied on friends. This whole sport's about friends and people. I learned early on, you make friends with the wives and the girlfriends of the other pullers. I hung out at Middleton's in Wilmington, Danny Dean's in South Charleston, if I was that area. Max Simpson, had to stay there a lot. Tommy Dickerson was on the way in Olean, New York. We'd lay over there. The women, they would do your laundry, they'd feed you all week, and you'd go. We had a lot of fun. During the week, we had a week off. In the fall, we might go to a Colts preseason game if we were at Danny's, you know. We might go to Dayton and ride go-karts, you know, or we might go to the Reds game if we're down in that area. You know, it made it fun. You know, when I go to Max Simpson's, Max respected me enough, he'd have me maybe split Van Dorp's tractor and work on the clutch for him, or work on his tractor for something to do, you know. But the friendships is what the sport was about for me. I ran a P-pump against Hypermax's big motors, but I could win because I was a puller. I could read the track. I ate, slept, and drank it. I was gonna tell you earlier, we'd get done in September at Inwood, we'd get to harvest that, man, I'd get in an old junk diesel car and I'd drive to Ohio and see Middleton's and Danny Dean and hang out just because I hadn't seen them for 3 months, you know. Loved going to Indy just to see everybody, hang out and visit. You know, this was before all the social media stuff where you keep up, you know. Nobody had, I think I had my first cell phone though in 89 or 90, you know. You didn't want to use it because it cost a fortune. You was very careful, otherwise I'd stop at payphones. In my heyday in the 80s, I'd stop at a payphone on a toll booth, call home with a credit card number. You know, you use your phone number, you had 4 digits. Call home, I'm still alive, I got second and third, you know, I'm leading the points, you know, check in. My folks allowed me to do it back then. You know, let me, like I said, something I was good at. I enjoyed it. I ate, slept, and drank it.